Little boy ran to the vampire king crying, "They're laughing at my mom!" Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The Autumn Market Festival in the town square of Ravenholm was supposed to be a celebration. Harvest goods displayed on wooden stalls, musicians playing cheerful tunes, children running between the crowds with sticky fingers from honey cakes. Lord Aldrich Thorne, Vampire King of the Northern Territories, had come at the mayor's invitation to demonstrate goodwill, to show that the supernatural and human communities could coexist peacefully during these increasingly tense times. He'd been examining a merchant's silverwork, making polite conversation about craftsmanship when the commotion started. A crowd had gathered near the town well, their voices rising in that particular tone that signaled mockery rather than genuine entertainment. Lord Aldrich had started to turn away. Human social dynamics were not his concern unless they threatened the peace, when the boy appeared. The child was small for 6 years old, with dark hair that stuck up in all directions and eyes that were too large in his thin face. His clothes were clean but worn, patched in multiple places with careful stitches that spoke of poverty and pride in equal measure. He'd clearly been crying for some time. His face was blotchy, his breathing hitched with sobs. And he'd run directly to Lord Aldrich, ignoring the very real danger of approaching a vampire lord uninvited. The guards moved immediately to intercept, but Lord Aldrich raised one hand, stopping them. Something about the child's desperation cut through 6 centuries of carefully maintained emotional distance. The boy wasn't running from something, he was running to someone, seeking protection from the one being in the square powerful enough to provide it. "Peace," Lord Aldrich said quietly to his guards. Then, to the boy, he knelt. An action that brought shocked gasps from the watching crowd, because vampire lords did not kneel for anyone, certainly not for human children, and met the child's eyes at his level. "Tell me what happened." The boy hiccuped, trying to control his crying enough to speak. They're laughing at my mom, making fun of her, saying mean things. And she's just trying to sell her bread, and they won't stop. And she looks so sad. And I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a rush, ending in another sob. Lord Aldrich looked past the boy toward the crowd at the well. Even from this distance, he could see what was happening. A woman, perhaps 30 years old, standing behind a small table with loaves of bread displayed carefully. She was slight, with the same dark hair as the boy, and her face held a kind of weary dignity as a group of better-dressed townsfolk surrounded her stall, their laughter cruel and deliberate. "That's my mom," the boy said, following Lord Aldrich's gaze. "Her name is Elena. She makes the best bread in the whole town, but nobody will buy it because… "Because why?" Lord Aldrich asked gently. "Because my dad was a vampire," the boy whispered, as though confessing a terrible secret. "Not anymore. He died 2 years ago in the border wars. But people say that makes us cursed, that we're dirty, that anyone who eats my mom's bread will get sick or become monsters, or…" He dissolved into tears again. Lord Aldrich felt something cold settle in his chest, not the cold of his vampire nature, but the cold of recognition. He knew this story, had seen it play out countless times across the centuries in different forms. Fear and prejudice wearing the mask of righteousness, finding targets among the vulnerable and calling it justice. The boy's father had been vampire. The mother was human. That made the child half-blood, caught between worlds, accepted by neither, marked as different in a way that made him a target for every narrow-minded fool looking to feel superior to someone. "What is your name?" Lord Aldrich asked. "Finn," the boy managed through his tears. "Finn Ashwood." "Well, Finn Ashwood, I am Lord Aldrich Thorne, and I am also a vampire. Does that frighten you?" Finn looked at him with those two large eyes and shook his head. "My dad was nice. He told me stories and taught me to count and always came home even when it was dangerous. He said vampires could be good or bad, same as anybody, so I'm not scared of you." "Your father was a wise man." Lord Aldrich stood, and as he did, his demeanor shifted. The carefully maintained facade of the polite visiting dignitary fell away, replaced by something older and far more dangerous. His guards recognized it immediately. Several stepped back instinctively. This was the vampire king who had ruled for 600 years, not through diplomacy alone, but through absolute authority when necessary. "Come with me, Finn," Lord Aldrich said, offering his hand. "Let's go have a conversation with these people who think mockery is acceptable." Finn took his hand without hesitation, a small, warm hand in his cold one, and they walked toward the well together. The crowd didn't notice them immediately. They were too busy with their entertainment. Lord Aldrich could hear the comments now, sharp and deliberately loud enough for Elena to hear. "Imagine selling food touched by monster blood hands. My children won't eat anything from her." "Who knows what curse it carries? She should leave town. Take her half-breed spawn with her. We don't want their kind here." Elena stood behind her table, her back straight despite the verbal assault, her hands folded carefully in front of her. She didn't respond, didn't defend herself, just endured with the kind of dignity that came from having survived worse. But Lord Aldrich could see the pain in her eyes, the way her jaw was clenched to hold back tears. Then she saw Finn approaching with Lord Aldrich, and her expression transformed to horror. "Finn, no! Get away from—" She stopped as recognition hit. The Vampire Lord! Her son was holding hands with the Vampire Lord. "Mom!" Finn called, pulling Lord Aldrich forward. "I got help! Lord Aldrich is going to make them stop!" The crowd fell silent as they registered the Vampire King's presence. The mockery died on their lips, replaced by sudden, sharp fear. Lord Aldrich could smell it on them, the acrid scent of humans realizing they'd been caught doing something they knew was wrong by someone who had the power to punish them. "Continue," Lord Aldrich said pleasantly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. "Please, I was finding it educational. What was that last comment about monster blood and half-breed spawn? Do elaborate." No one spoke. The ringleader, a portly man in merchant's finery, tried to back away, but Lord Aldrich's gaze pinned him in place. "You," Lord Aldrich said, pointing at him. "Yes, you with the expensive doublet and the cheap character. Step forward." The man had no choice. When a vampire lord commanded, humans obeyed. Not through magic, but through the kind of primal survival instinct that recognized apex predators. He stepped forward on shaking legs. "What is your name?" Lord Aldrich asked. Gerald Hardwick, my lord." "I'm a cloth merchant. I meant no offense. I was merely mocking a widow and her child for having vampire heritage while standing in a town that exists under my protection, in territories that I rule, during a festival that I was invited to as a gesture of peace between our peoples." Lord Aldrich's voice remained pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. "That is, we were just..." "Just what? Just expressing the kind of prejudice that starts wars? Just teaching your children that it's acceptable to attack those weaker than yourselves? Just demonstrating that despite centuries of coexistence, humans still haven't learned that cruelty to the vulnerable makes you weak, not strong? The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the commotion. Lord Aldrich's guards had formed a perimeter, and the mayor was pushing through, his face red with either embarrassment or exertion. "My lord," the mayor said, slightly out of breath, "please, if there's been some misunderstanding—" "There's been no misunderstanding, Mayor Brennan. I understand perfectly. This woman," he gestured to Elena, "is being harassed for the crime of having married a vampire and borne his child. These fine citizens of Ravenholm believe that gives them the right to mock her, insult her child, and drive away her livelihood. Is this the goodwill you invited me here to celebrate?" Mayor Brennan paled. "My lord, I had no knowledge of this situation. If I had known—" "If you had known what? You would have intervened? Or you would have ensured it happened somewhere I wouldn't see it?" Lord Aldrich's gaze swept across the assembled crowd. "Let me be extraordinarily clear about something. The covenant that governs relations between humans and vampires exists to protect both peoples. It forbids vampires from hunting humans indiscriminately. It also, and this seems to have been forgotten, forbids humans from persecuting those with vampire heritage." He moved to stand beside Elena's table, picking up one of the loaves of bread. It was beautifully made, golden crust, even texture, the kind of craftsmanship that came from skill and care. "Elena Ashwood," he said, turning to her, "what do you charge for this bread?" Elena looked confused, frightened, and uncertain. "2 coppers, my lord, but you don't need to." "2 coppers seems reasonable." Lord Aldrich pulled out a gold sovereign, worth at least 50 loaves, and placed it on her table. "I'll take all of it, every loaf you've brought today. My household can always use quality bread." "My lord, that's too much. I can't." "You can and you will. Consider it payment not just for the bread, but for enduring this harassment with such dignity." He turned back to the crowd. "Now, who else would like to purchase bread from Elena Ashwood? Excellent bread, made by skilled hands, completely safe to eat unless you're one of those foolish enough to believe that bloodline determines character." Silence. No one moved. No one? Lord Aldrich's voice turned cold. "How interesting. Gerald Hartwick, step forward again." The merchant obeyed, trembling visibly now. "You have a stall in this market, yes?" "Yes, my lord. Fine fabrics, imported silks." "Not anymore. As of this moment, you are forbidden from trading in my territories. Your goods will be confiscated and distributed to the poor. Your stall is forfeit." "What? You can't!" "I can. I am vampire lord of these territories, and the covenant gives me authority over those who violate its terms. You persecuted a woman under my protection. This is your punishment." "For speaking freely, this is tyranny." "No," Lord Aldrich said softly. "Tyranny is using your social position to torment someone who can't fight back. This is justice. Learn the difference." He turned to the others who had been part of the mocking crowd. "The rest of you have a choice. You can step forward now, purchase bread from Elena Ashwood, and apologize sincerely for your behavior. Or you can stand there in silent defiance, in which case I will remember your faces, and you will find that trading in vampire territories becomes remarkably difficult for those who practice discrimination." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, a young woman stepped forward. I'll take 2 loaves, please." It broke the dam. One by one, people came forward, some with genuine apology in their eyes, others with resentment they tried to hide, but all of them purchasing bread. Elena's small table was emptied within minutes, and she stood there with a purse full of coins, tears streaming down her face. Finn watched it all with wide eyes, still holding Lord Aldrich's hand. When the crowd had dispersed, Elena approached Lord Aldrich with visible trepidation. "My lord, I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem sufficient." "Then say nothing. Or, better yet, tell me about your situation. Your husband, Finn's father, he died in the border wars?" "Yes, my lord. His name was Thomas. He was a scout for the Territorial Guard, one of the few vampires allowed to serve because of his tracking abilities. He was ambushed by rogue werewolves 2 years ago, died protecting a human patrol unit." Her voice caught. "They gave him a commendation, said he was a hero, but it didn't stop people from treating us like outsiders after he was gone." "And you've been surviving on bread making?" "I was a baker's apprentice before I married Thomas. It's all I know, but it's been difficult. People don't want to buy from me, and other bakers have persuaded the Guildhall not to grant me a proper license. I sell at markets when they'll allow it, which isn't often." Lord Aldrich considered this. "Do you have family? Support?" "No, my lord. My family disowned me when I married Thomas. His family. Most vampires don't have close family structures the way humans do. We're alone, Finn and I." "But we manage. I won't let him grow up thinking the world is only cruel. There's kindness, too, even if we have to search harder to find it." Finn tugged on Lord Aldrich's coat. "Are you going to help my mom, like you helped just now?" Lord Aldrich looked down at the boy. This child who'd had the courage to run to a vampire lord seeking justice, who'd trusted despite every reason his short life had given him to be afraid. He thought about Elena, maintaining dignity in the face of cruelty. He thought about Thomas, dying to protect humans who would later mock his family. And he thought about the kind of world that produced such stories, and whether he had the power to change it. "Yes," he said finally, "I'm going to help. But not just your mother, Finn. I'm going to help every family like yours. Because this," he gestured to the now quiet square, "is unacceptable, and I should have addressed it years ago." The next 3 days transformed Ravenholm in ways no one expected. Lord Aldrich didn't leave town as planned. Instead, he established temporary residence in the mayor's administrative building and issued a series of proclamations that sent shockwaves through the human and vampire communities alike. First, all territories under his rule would immediately implement anti-discrimination laws. Persecution based on vampire heritage, full or partial, was now a criminal offense punishable by fines, property confiscation, or, in extreme cases, exile. Second, mixed heritage families would receive formal recognition and protection. Any vampire or human who married across species lines and produced children would be registered with the territorial government and guaranteed rights equal to pureblood families of either species. Third, a new position was created, Advocate for Mixed Heritage Affairs, tasked with investigating discrimination complaints, mediating disputes, and ensuring the new laws were enforced. The reactions were predictably mixed. Conservative elements in both communities were outraged. Progressive factions praised the move. Most people fell somewhere in between, uncertain, worried about change, but unwilling to openly defy a vampire lord's direct command. Elena watched it all from her small cottage on the edge of town with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that maybe things would genuinely improve, fear that the attention would make her and Finn even more vulnerable once Lord Aldrich inevitably moved on to other concerns. But Lord Aldrich kept surprising her. On the second day, he arrived at her cottage with an unexpected proposal. Elena Ashwood, I've spoken with the Bakers Guild. They've agreed to grant you a full license, retroactive to when you first applied 3 years ago. They were quite cooperative once I explained that their previous discrimination violated covenant law and could result in guild dissolution. Elena had stared at him, stunned. My lord, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it. Say you'll continue making excellent bread, training apprentices if you wish, and demonstrating that skill and character matter more than bloodline." He paused. "Also, I'm purchasing this cottage and the 3 acres around it. You'll have secure tenure, rent-free, for as long as you wish to stay. Consider it compensation for years of harassment that occurred under my jurisdiction." "My lord, that's too much. I can't accept." "You can and you will. Consider it an investment in proving that my territories can be places where mixed heritage families thrive rather than merely survive." Finn, who'd been watching from the cottage doorway, ran forward. "Does this mean people will stop being mean to Mom?" "Not immediately," Lord Aldrich said honestly. "People's beliefs change slowly. But it means your mother has legal protection now. It means anyone who discriminates against you can be held accountable. It's not perfect, but it's progress." "Will you stay?" Finn asked. "To make sure they don't hurt Mom when you're gone?" Lord Aldrich knelt again, meeting the boy's eyes. "I can't stay permanently, Finn. I have responsibilities across all the Northern Territories. But I'm assigning guards to this area, and I'm appointing someone you can always reach if there's trouble. And," he pulled out a small medallion, silver with his personal seal. "This is for you. If you're ever in danger, if anyone threatens you or your mother, show them this. It means you're under my direct protection. Any vampire or human affiliated with my court will help you immediately." Finn took the medallion with reverent care, as though he'd been given a magical artifact. "Thank you. You're like the heroes in Mom's stories." "I'm nothing so grand. I'm simply doing what should have been done long ago." Lord Aldrich stood, turned to Elena. "One more thing. I'm hosting a formal dinner tomorrow night at the Mayor's Hall. You and Finn are invited as guests of honor. Attendance is mandatory for all guild leaders, merchant heads, and community leaders. They'll have the opportunity to meet you as people rather than targets, to hear your story, to understand what their discrimination has cost." Elena's face paled. "My lord, I'm not sure that's wise. Forcing people to attend will only breed resentment." "Perhaps, but silence breeds ignorance, and ignorance breeds cruelty. Sometimes you have to force people into uncomfortable conversations to create change. Will you come?" Elena looked at Finn, who was clutching the medallion and nodding enthusiastically. She looked back at Lord Aldrich, this ancient vampire who'd somehow become their unlikely champion. "We'll come." The dinner was exactly as awkward as Elena had feared, and somehow more transformative than she'd hoped. The Mayor's Hall had been set up with formal tables, fine dishes borrowed from the wealthiest households, and enough candles to turn night into twilight. The guest list included everyone with social or economic power in Ravenholm, and their attendance was indeed mandatory, enforced by the implicit threat that refusing a vampire lord's invitation was unwise. Elena arrived wearing her best dress, which was still obviously worn and patched, holding Finn's hand as they faced a room full of people who'd spent years making their lives difficult. Many wouldn't meet her eyes. Others stared with barely concealed resentment. Lord Aldrich met them at the door. "Thank you for coming. I know this is uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable is an understatement, my lord." "Yes, but necessary." He guided them to the head table, where they were seated in positions of honor beside him. The symbolism wasn't subtle. the vampire lord elevating the discriminated woman and her child to positions of respect, forcing the community to acknowledge them as equals. After everyone had been served the first course, bread from Elena's bakery, prominently displayed and identified, Lord Aldrich stood to address the room. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. I know many of you would prefer to be elsewhere. Some of you are angry about the new laws I've implemented. Some believe I'm overstepping my authority. Some think I'm being too harsh on Gerald Hartwick, whose trading license remains revoked." He let that sink in. "I want to explain why I'm doing this. Not to justify myself. I am Vampire Lord. I need no justification. But because understanding might prevent future conflicts." He gestured to Elena and Finn. "This is Elena Ashwood and her son, Finn. Finn is 6 years old. His favorite food is honey cakes. He wants to be a blacksmith when he grows up. He can count to 100 and is learning to read. He likes to collect interesting stones from the river. He's afraid of thunderstorms, but pretends not to be because he thinks it makes him braver." The room was silent, everyone listening despite themselves. Elena is a skilled baker. You can taste the evidence before you. She's a widow who lost her husband defending human soldiers from werewolf attack. She's survived 2 years of harassment and discrimination while raising her son alone, teaching him that despite how he's treated, people can be good. She's never broken a law, never harmed anyone, never done anything except try to earn an honest living. Lord Aldrich's gaze swept the room. "Finn ran to me 3 days ago, crying because people were mocking his mother. A 6-year-old child who'd been taught to fear vampires came to a vampire lord seeking justice because humans had failed him so completely that a monster seemed safer than his own community. Think about what that says about you." The silence was profound and uncomfortable. "I've lived 600 years, Lord Aldrich continued. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. I've watched humans and vampires cycle through peace and war repeatedly. And I've learned something. Every war, every conflict, every tragedy has started with the same thing. People deciding that those who are different are automatically enemies. That mixing between groups is wrong. That children of mixed heritage are somehow impure or cursed." He placed his hand on Finn's shoulder, a gesture of protection and affirmation. "This child is not cursed. He's not a monster. He's not a threat to your community. He's a boy who loves his mother, who wants to learn a trade, who dreams of being brave. The only thing that makes him different is that some of you have decided difference equals danger." Elena spoke up then, her voice quiet but steady. "My lord, if I may?" Lord Aldrich nodded, yielding the floor. Elena stood, facing the room full of people who'd made her life difficult. "I don't expect you to like me. I don't expect you to suddenly embrace mixed heritage families with open arms. But I'm asking you to see us as people. When you mock my child in the street, when you refuse to buy bread I've spent hours making, when you whisper that we're cursed, you're not protecting your community. You're teaching your children that cruelty is acceptable if the target is weak enough." Her voice strengthened. "My husband Thomas died saving human lives. He could have fled when the werewolves attacked. He was faster, stronger, better equipped to survive. But he stayed and fought because he believed in the covenant, believed that protecting others mattered more than preserving himself. He died believing that humans and vampires could live together peacefully." Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. Don't make his death meaningless by proving him wrong. The silence that followed was different than before, thoughtful rather than defensive, uncomfortable in a way that suggested actual reflection. Then, unexpectedly, someone stood. An elderly woman Elena recognized, Mrs. Hadley, who ran the general store and had always pointedly ignored Elena when she came in. Mrs. Ashwood. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the forced one I gave when Lord Aldrich made us buy bread. My grandson asked me why we didn't talk to you, and I told him it was because your family was different. He asked what different meant, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Nothing that didn't sound cruel when I said it out loud to a child. She took a shaking breath. I'm old and set in my ways, and I don't change easy. But I'm ashamed of how I've behaved. You didn't deserve it. Your boy didn't deserve it. I'm sorry. It was like a dam breaking. Others stood. Not all, but enough. Apologies that ranged from genuine to grudging, but all of them acknowledgments that the treatment had been wrong. Some remained seated, faces closed, unwilling to bend, but even they couldn't maintain their certainty in the face of the shifting room. Lord Aldrich watched it all with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Later, when the dinner had ended and most guests had left, she asked him about it. Did you plan that? The apologies? I hoped for it, but I couldn't guarantee it. People's capacity for change is unpredictable. He looked at Finn, who'd fallen asleep on one of the benches, clutching his protective medallion even in sleep. Your son gave me something I'd forgotten I still had. What's that, my lord? Hope. He ran to me believing I could help, and that belief made me want to be worthy of it. Most beings stop expecting things from me centuries ago. They fear me, or respect me, or use me, but they don't hope. Finn hoped. It was, he paused, searching for words, unexpectedly affecting. He sees you as a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm a ruler who should have addressed this injustice years ago, but didn't until a crying child made it impossible to ignore. Elena smiled slightly. Maybe that's what heroes are. People who do the right thing when they finally can't avoid it anymore. The perfect ones don't exist outside stories. Lord Aldrich remained in Ravenholm for 2 more weeks, long enough to establish the groundwork for lasting change. The advocate for mixed heritage affairs was appointed, a human lawyer named Catherine Wells, who'd built a reputation for defending unpopular causes. Anti-discrimination laws were codified, enforcement mechanisms established, penalties clearly defined. But more importantly, something shifted in the town's atmosphere. Not overnight transformation, that was fairy tale thinking, but a gradual thawing. Shop owners who'd previously ignored Elena started offering polite greetings. Children who'd taunted Finn began playing with him cautiously, testing whether the protection medallion meant they'd be punished for past behavior. It wasn't perfect. There were still those who muttered about vampire lovers and half-breeds, who resented the changes forced upon them. But they muttered quietly now, without the public confidence that came from believing their prejudice was socially acceptable. On the day Lord Aldrich prepared to leave, Finn ran to find him with something clutched in his small hands. "Lord Aldrich, wait! I made you something!" It was a drawing, rendered in the enthusiastic but somewhat shaky style of a 6-year-old. It showed a large figure, presumably Lord Aldrich, identifiable mainly by being significantly taller than everyone else, holding hands with a small figure, definitely Finn, given the distinctive messy hair, while other figures stood around them. Smiling figures, Elena noted with surprise. "That's us," Finn explained, "at the festival, when you made them be nice. I drew it so you'd remember." Lord Aldrich took the drawing with careful hands, studying it with an attention that suggested he understood exactly what it meant. A child's attempt to preserve a moment when the world had suddenly made sense. when someone powerful had chosen to use that power for protection rather than control. "Thank you, Finn. I'll keep this somewhere safe." "Will you come back?" Finn asked, "to visit?" "I will. I have responsibilities across all the territories, but I'll return periodically to ensure the changes are maintained." And he tapped the medallion hanging around Finn's neck. "You can always send word if you need help. The guards I've stationed nearby have orders to escort any message from you directly to me, wherever I am." "Anywhere?" "Anywhere." Finn considered this, then threw his arms around Lord Aldrich's legs in an impulsive hug. "Thank you for helping my mom. You're the best vampire king ever." Lord Aldrich stiffened briefly. Physical affection was not something he'd experienced in centuries, then carefully placed one hand on the boy's head in acknowledgement. "Try to stay out of trouble, Finn Ashwood, and continue being brave. The world needs more people willing to run toward help rather than away from problems." Elena approached as Finn released him. "My lord, I know I've said it before, but thank you for everything. You've given us more than physical safety. You've given us dignity, recognition, a future where Finn might grow up without constant fear. I've done what should have been done long ago. But you're welcome." He paused, then added more quietly, "Your husband would be proud of you. Raising Finn alone, maintaining your dignity through such harassment, teaching him to hope despite everything, that's real strength, the kind that matters more than physical power." After Lord Aldrich and his entourage departed, Elena and Finn stood watching until the last guard disappeared over the hill. Then Finn tugged her hand. "Mom, can we make special bread, the kind with honey and nuts, to celebrate?" "We can make whatever kind you want, sweetheart." As they walked back toward their cottage, their secure, rent-free cottage on land they could actually call home, Elena felt something she'd almost forgotten. Not just relief or gratitude, but actual hope. Not the desperate hope that comes from having no other options, but genuine hope that tomorrow might be better than today. That evening, as Finn helped her mix dough, mostly by making a mess and eating ingredients, he asked, "Mom, will people always remember what Lord Aldrich did?" "I don't know, honey. Sometimes people forget important things." "Then I'll remember for them. When I grow up, I'll tell people about the vampire king who was nice, about how he helped us when nobody else would, about how monsters can be good and good people can be mean, and you have to pay attention to what people do, not just what they are." Elena pulled him into a hug, getting flour in his hair. "That's very wise, Finn. Lord Aldrich told me that when we were walking to the well that first day. He said judging people by their choices matters more than judging them by their nature. He's right." Later, after Finn had fallen asleep in his small bed, Elena sat by the window looking at the stars and thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she'd been a harassed widow, barely surviving. Now she had legal protection, a secure home, a legitimate business license, and, most surprisingly, the personal protection of one of the most powerful vampires in existence. All because her son had been brave enough to run to a stranger and cry, "They're laughing at my mom." Sometimes, she thought, the most shocking things weren't displays of power or dramatic declarations. Sometimes the most shocking thing was simply someone with authority choosing to listen to a powerless child and deciding that his tears mattered. That was a revolution more profound than any law. 5 years passed. Finn was 11 now, taller but still with the same messy hair and 2 large eyes. The protective medallion Lord Aldrich had given him was worn smooth from constant handling, but had never needed to use it for its intended purpose. The changes Lord Aldrich had implemented held, not perfectly, but solidly enough that discrimination became underground rather than overt. Elena's bakery had expanded. She'd taken on 2 apprentices, 1 human, 1 half-vampire like Finn, and her breads were now considered the best in 3 counties. The cottage had been improved and expanded with her earnings, and she'd paid back Lord Aldrich's initial investment, despite his insistence it was a gift. Finn had indeed pursued blacksmithing, apprenticing with Samuel Ironfoot, the town's mastersmith. Samuel was a werewolf who'd settled in Ravenholm decades ago, and he'd taken one look at Finn, this boy who carried both human and vampire heritage with quiet pride, and decided he'd make an excellent apprentice. Lord Aldrich returned twice annually, always announced, always formal. But he also always made time to visit Elena and Finn, to see how they were progressing, to ensure the protections were holding. These visits were less about legal oversight and more about friendship, Elena had realized. An unlikely friendship between a vampire lord and a widow with a half-blood son, but genuine nonetheless. On one such visit, when Finn was helping Samuel repair a wagon wheel and Elena was managing the bakery, Lord Aldrich stood in the town square where it had all begun. The well was still there, the market still operated on festival days. But the atmosphere was different. Mixed heritage families walked openly, children of different backgrounds played together, and the kind of casual cruelty that had once been socially acceptable had become something people whispered about only in dark corners. Mayor Brennan, older and wiser now, approached Lord Aldrich. "My lord, I wanted to thank you, not just for what you did 5 years ago, but for continuing to check on us, for not just implementing laws and leaving enforcement to sort itself out. The laws only work if people believe they're serious. Periodic visits ensure belief." Lord Aldrich glanced at the mayor. "Also, I find I've become invested in this particular town's success. It's become something of a model for my other territories." Because of the boy, Finn. Because of Finn, yes, and because of Elena. And because this town proved that people can change when given proper motivation and clear expectations. He smiled slightly. "Though I admit, I remain curious whether the change would have held if I didn't return regularly to remind everyone I'm paying attention." "I think it would," Mayor Brennan said thoughtfully. "Oh, there'd be backsliding, there always is. But the younger generation has grown up seeing mixed heritage families as normal. My own grandchildren play with Finn regularly, and when I hear them talk about their futures, they don't include the prejudices my generation carried." "That's not law enforcement, my lord. That's cultural shift." Lord Aldrich considered this. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps Finn gave me more than hope that day. He gave me the opportunity to prove that change is possible, not just enforceable." That evening, at dinner with Elena and Finn, now held in Elena's expanded cottage rather than at formal venues, Finn had news. "Lord Aldrich, I wanted to tell you something. Samuel says in 2 years, when I'm 13, I'll be ready to start making my own pieces, and I've been thinking about what my first major work should be." "Oh? What have you decided?" "A gate for the town square, where the well is." Finn's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "Samuel says I'm good with decorative ironwork, and I want to make a gate that shows humans and vampires together, like a permanent reminder of what happened there, but also showing what it should be, not just tolerance, but actual cooperation." Elena watched Lord Aldrich's face carefully. She'd learned to read his expressions over the years, subtle shifts that most people missed. She saw surprise, pleasure, and something that might have been emotion if vampires allowed themselves such obvious displays. "That's an ambitious project for a first major work," Lord Aldrich said carefully. "I know. Samuel said it might take me months, maybe even a year, but he said ambitious projects are how you grow." Finn leaned forward eagerly, and I thought, if you approved, if you thought it was a good idea, maybe when it's done, you could be there for the installation, because it all started with you listening when I ran to you crying. The gate would be like a thank you that everyone could see." Lord Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I would be honored to attend the installation. And Finn, the fact that you're thinking about how to preserve and celebrate this change, that speaks well of your character. Your father would be very proud." After Finn had gone to bed, excited about his gate project, Elena and Lord Aldrich sat in the cottage's small garden, where she grew herbs for baking. The night was cool, stars bright overhead. "He's doing well," Lord Aldrich observed. "Both of you are. Because of you. Because of your strength and his courage. I simply removed obstacles. You did more than that. You gave us hope when we'd almost run out. You showed us that power could be used for protection rather than oppression." Elena looked at him. "Can I ask you something personal, my lord?" "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer." "Why did you really help us that day? I've wondered about it for years." "Yes, Finn came to you seeking help, and yes, what was happening was wrong. But you're a vampire lord with countless responsibilities. You could have assigned guards, made some proclamations, and moved on. Instead, you stayed, implemented sweeping changes, and you keep returning to check on a widow and her son. Why?" Lord Aldrich was silent for so long Elena thought he might not answer. Then, "Because I'd forgotten something crucial. I'd ruled for 600 years by being pragmatic, strategic, focused on maintaining stability and preventing war. Those are important things, necessary things. But in focusing on the large-scale threats, I'd stopped seeing individual injustices. I'd let cruelty become background noise as long as it didn't threaten the Covenant." He looked at the stars. "Then, a 6-year-old boy ran to me crying because people were mocking his mother, and I realized I'd become complicit in exactly the kind of casual cruelty that undermines everything I claim to stand for. The grand wars don't start with declarations and armies. They start with small, unchallenged injustices that teach people that certain lives don't matter. So we were a wake-up call. You were a reminder that the most important battles aren't always the obvious ones. That sometimes the difference between a just ruler and a tyrant is whether you respond to a crying child." He smiled slightly. "Also, I've discovered something surprising in my old age." "What's that?" "I actually enjoy coming here. Enjoy seeing Finn grow up. Enjoy watching you thrive. Enjoy knowing that something I did created lasting positive change rather than just preventing temporary negative outcomes. It's," he searched for words, "unexpectedly fulfilling." Elena laughed softly. 600 years old, and you're just now discovering that helping people feels good? I've helped people before, saved lives, prevented disasters, maintained peace, but it was always at a distance, large-scale interventions for strategic purposes. This is different. This is personal. I know Finn's favorite foods and what excites him about blacksmithing. I know you've been experimenting with sourdough starters and that your apprentice Tomas shows real promise. These aren't strategic concerns, they're just connections. Is that allowed for vampire lords to have connections? I've never seen it explicitly forbidden in any treaty or tradition, so I'm choosing to believe it's acceptable. He stood, preparing to leave. Thank you, Elena, for letting me be part of your lives, for not treating me as just a distant ruler, but as someone who can sit in your garden and have honest conversations. Thank you for being the kind of ruler who responds when a frightened child runs to you for help. As Lord Aldrich departed, Elena sat alone in her garden, thinking about the strange, wonderful turn her life had taken. From desperation to security, from isolation to community, from surviving to thriving. All because her brave, impulsive son had run to the most powerful being in the territory and cried for help. The shocking thing, she realized, wasn't what Lord Aldrich had done. The laws, the protections, the sweeping changes. The shocking thing was that it had taken a child's tears to make him recognize that power meant nothing if it wasn't used to protect the vulnerable. And perhaps even more shocking, he'd listened, and he'd kept listening year after year. That was the real revolution. Epilogue, 2 years later. The gate installation ceremony took place on a perfect autumn day, 13 years almost to the day since Finn had run crying to Lord Aldrich in this very square. The gate itself was magnificent, Finn's masterwork, forged with Samuel's guidance but bearing Finn's distinctive artistic vision. Wrought iron formed intricate patterns showing humans and vampires working together, farmers and craftsmen, scholars and soldiers, parents and children. At the center, small but prominent, was a figure that anyone who knew the story recognized. A small boy holding the hand of a tall vampire, both facing forward together. The installation ceremony was attended by representatives from across the Northern Territories. Mixed heritage families had become common enough that seeing them in the crowd no longer caused comment. The anti-discrimination laws had spread to neighboring regions, creating a network of protected territories where blood status mattered less than character. Finn, now 13 and showing early signs of his vampire heritage in his height and grace, stood beside his finished work with justifiable pride. Elena stood with him, Samuel on his other side, the three of them representing the kind of unlikely family that the gate itself celebrated. Lord Aldrich gave a speech, formal, political, appropriate for the dignitaries present. But then he did something unexpected. He asked Finn to speak. "I was 6 when this all started," Finn said, his voice surprisingly steady for a 13-year-old addressing a crowd. "I was scared and angry because people were being mean to my mom. I didn't know what to do, so I ran to the scariest, most powerful person I could find and asked for help." A small laughter rippled through the crowd. "I was lucky. Lord Aldrich listened. He could have ignored me or sent me away, but he didn't. He knelt down, looked me in the eye, and asked what happened. Then he did something about it." Finn gestured to the gate. "I made this to remember that moment, but also to remind everyone, including me, that the scariest things aren't always dangerous, and the safest things aren't always kind. You have to pay attention to what people do, not just what they are." He looked at Lord Aldrich. "I wanted my first major work to be something that mattered. I hope this does." "It matters," Lord Aldrich said quietly, "more than you know." As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Lord Aldrich found himself approached by a young woman, barely 20, with the distinctive features that marked her as half-vampire. She carried a small child, perhaps 2 years old. "My lord," she said shyly, "I wanted to thank you. I grew up in Ravenholm after the changes. Because of what you did, I never experienced the kind of harassment Finn and his mother endured. I met my husband," she gestured to a young human man standing nearby, "without fear. Our daughter will grow up in a world where her mixed heritage is recognized and protected. I wanted you to know that your actions changed everything for people like us." She handed Lord Aldrich a letter. "This is from the Mixed Heritage Coalition, families across all your territories. We've documented our stories, what life was like before and after the reforms. We thought you should know the impact you've had." After she left, Lord Aldrich stood holding the letter, watching Finn demonstrate the gates, moving sections to interested observers. Elena caught his eye and smiled, a smile that said she understood what he was feeling, even if he couldn't quite name it himself. Later, much later, after the crowds had gone and the square was quiet, Lord Aldrich sat on the edge of the well where it had all begun. The gate stood gleaming in the moonlight, its iron figures frozen in perpetual cooperation. Finn approached with Elena, both of them carrying mugs of hot cider. "We thought you might want company," Finn said. "It's been a big day." "It has indeed." They sat together in companionable silence, three people who'd been brought together by tears and desperation and had somehow built something lasting from it. "Lord Aldrich," Finn said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day, when I ran to you crying, were you scared? That you'd do the wrong thing, or that you wouldn't be able to help?" Lord Aldrich considered the question seriously. "I was uncertain. I'd ruled for centuries by maintaining distance, by thinking strategically rather than emotionally. You presented me with a situation that demanded emotional response. A child in distress, seeking help from someone he had every reason to fear. I wasn't sure I still knew how to respond to that kind of trust. But you did. I tried. And you made it easy by being so forthright about what you needed. Their laughing at my mom is remarkably clear communication. No politics, no hidden agendas, just honest need honestly expressed. Samuel says that's the key to good work, knowing exactly what you want to make before you start forging. Maybe it's the same with helping people. Your mentor is a wise man." As the evening deepened into night, Lord Aldrich eventually stood to leave. He had other territories to visit, other responsibilities to manage. But he would return, not just because duty demanded periodic oversight, but because this place, these people, had become something more than subjects or concerns. They'd become the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. What was the point of 600 years of life if you never connected with anyone? What was the purpose of absolute power if you never used it for something beyond strategic necessity? Finn had given him that answer by running to him with tears and trust in equal measure. And the shocking thing, the truly shocking thing, was how much that simple act had changed everything.